Hello and welcome back to my channel. I am Corrupt Zen, and today I want to show you how I make art and NPCs for my Dungeons and Dragons games using AI websites such as Artflow and Dall. So today we're going to be showing you how to go from something like this rotted monster into something a little bit better and how to fix some of the smaller issues and what to do. Okay, so this is going to be really quick and educational. What you're going to need is a Dall account. I'm sorry if you don't have this. There are other options such as Midjourney, which is a Discord AI bot that does do really good work. However, I'm going to be using Dall 2 today, so if you do not have Dall 2, you will have to apply for that. I'm also using Artflow AI, which is free and available on the internet, and also free is GIMP. So I'm going to be using GIMP, and as you can see, this is the end result. You can see that we have done a little bit of extra editing here just to clean up those little errors. So now that you can see what exactly we're going to be doing, I'll show you how to do it. We're going to go ahead and start with a brand new portrait. So I'm going to begin in Artflow because it creates better faces than Dall. In my opinion, Dall has a lot of trouble making faces. So we're going to start with a pretty normal prompt, something that we can envision being a full body artwork instead of just a face maybe. So I've attempted to make a musician. Let's do a musician. Now, this is a strange musician as the prompt, but the picture did not really come out very inspiring. He looks very simple. So I'm going to put a sci-fi fantasy musician. Artflow doesn't have the same versatility as what is going to appear in the picture. It only makes faces. So we're going to try and keep this much more simple than another prompt that you would use on maybe Dall. Those prompts are going to be a bit more interesting and long. But I'll show you how to do prompts in both of these. So in Artflow, it's best to keep it pretty simple. You can get pretty good results just from one short description, and unfortunately sometimes it can be a little bit hard to get exactly what you're looking for, so a couple tries couldn't hurt. Okay, so this looks pretty sufficient. Now, I already have a couple of females for what I want this for, so I don't need another female. I'm going to make this one a male, so I'm going to just go to the gender side here. Now, I don't need this character to be extremely masculine. I think maybe we'll do a half elf or something like that. I'll lower the age slightly, and let's increase elfness. It's kind of funny how they have these options sort of as racial options, and then they have goth and fairy tale princess as options. Kind of strange. And you can see these are very difficult to control in any meaningful way. You kind of just have to see what you like. So I kind of enjoy where we're at here so far. Now, all of what we just did in the identity section here is going to be influenced by these other options here. So going back and checking your options is a good way to make sure that you're not missing any cool looking art. So I think here's pretty good. I'm not sure what sculpture is meant to mean, but to me this makes this almost more of a digital art looking sketch. I'm not sure what exactly the intent of being a sculpture is supposed to mean, but I'll just click around until I find one I enjoy, so I think we'll just go with that one. Now, for their expression, I think we're gonna try something like that, perhaps. Head rotation's a important slider here. This will get you a much better profile, and I probably don't need to tell you, a profile is going to be much more attractive than a head-on image of a face, so I do recommend using a profile. Not always, but it is generally a good idea. Complexion can be strange. Fair complexion kind of seems to just make you Anglo-Saxon. Dark complexion, honestly, doesn't seem to have much to do with complexion, but it'll change the hair to be darker sometimes. Again, as I had mentioned, we're just going to click around to see what we get. Now, I did mention I wanted this to be male. I think we're going to have to increase the male slider just a bit. Still looking a little bit too androgynous, even for a half-elf. I want them to be somewhat attractive. I think we're on the right track here. Not too attractive, though. Okay. Hair is also a bit difficult, but I think slightly longer makes sense for a bard. Now, your image may not come out the way you want, and in that instance, I would just start a new one. So as I said, all of these options are fairly integrated into each other. It can be hard to separate them once you begin to add things such as beards. You can see how it dramatically changes everything. I'm pretty sure we're going to have to go with this magnificence up here. Okay. And finally, accessories. I honestly don't think the accessories look very good, and as you can see, they sometimes cause a lot of distortion, so just be very careful with the accessories. As you can see, glasses pertain more to around the eye, but cause a lot of distortion. So in order to get something that looks good, we're just going to be careful here. I like this hat. I like how the hair turned into a hat, and little mistakes like that we can edit. But for now, I feel like this is almost pretty cool, but let's stick with the hair. Okay, now we can save that. That works for me. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to drag this onto my desktop to save that. Next, we're going to go into GIMP and start a new project and drag our face here. Now, I want a full body or a upper half torso, so this is probably a good size. And I do want to leave a little room to finish out the hair, so we'll leave a little room on top. That's fine. We'll go ahead and export that and name it something random because we're going to delete this later anyway. Export that as whatever you want. And then we're going to go over to Dall. We're going to go to Upload. And we're going to find the image we just saved. Not that one. Make sure it's the one with the large border. Okay, so as we can see, we need to crop. If you press skip cropping, that does something completely different. And as of September 2022, this version of Dall does require you to crop in order to start editing. So we crop and then edit. As you saw, edit becomes available. This takes you to the edit screen, and this could take a little bit of getting used to, but the important thing to remember is it's not perfect. It is sufficient, however. So what we're going to do is use the eraser tool, and we're just going to get close to our image first, close as we can, just to save time. Okay. Now that the rest has turned transparent, we're going to slide that all the way down to small. Here is the size control for the tool. There is the zoom, and we're going to zoom in. and then we're going to go ahead and pan with the pan tool here. Then we're going to go back to the eraser, and we're going to carefully make sure to remove stuff like the background for the most part, because we don't really need that. And the closer we get to the face, ooh, he's got quite a tumor, doesn't he? The closer we get to the face, the better we can generate a background using Dall. Now I'm going to leave that weird tumor in because from my purposes for the game this character is going to be for is a bit of a darker themed game where diseases and such are common, and we can say that this bard had a little run-in with a magical disease, and now he has a bit of a tumor. Gives him a little character. So we're going to carefully make sure to get all of the hair, and you'll see I'm carefully going around the edge of the image because that is how the AI is going to detect the border of the image. If we do not get close enough and we do not actually enter into the image slightly, it will not detect that edge as being anything other than white, and that's kind of how it'll generate and just make a big mess. So as you can see, all of the borders are now erased as close as possible. Let's zoom out. When it generates, it'll fill this in. But first, we need a prompt. Okay. Now I'll go over what I'm doing. So my prompt for my last character is a good way to template this new character. This just says a digital art painting, and that is the most important part to start with. A digital art painting. You can even put a fantasy digital art painting. And then everywhere from here to here doesn't matter. An elderly, I even misspelled it, Marine, CL female, tropical island, wearing a blue bikini. Great. The important part is that we then separate this with a comma, and make sure you do not mess this up. You have to put a comma space, or it will mess up. Now, this last part is mandatory. It says realistic, highly detailed, and then this part is actually a lens setting for a photography lens. I found this by simply Googling the suggested lenses for use with Dall. So that is actually found here. Prompt design for Dall photorealism. You don't have to do this. I'll tell you what I use, but if you want to try a different style, like if you want something like this, they do suggest including the names of specific artists. If you like artists, you could put something really cool here, like a comic book artist. And that works because it is going to essentially crawl Google searches for examples of what you mean. So it will know. It will know. Here's another good example if you want something more action-oriented or something more with a background. And I don't know what any of this stuff means, which means you don't need to either. I just look at these as examples and I said, oh, I like the one that says whatever, Sigma 24 millimeter. I don't know what the rest of this stuff means. That's fine. This is just what I've been using to really good results. So if you want to copy what I'm doing or try something else, that is up to you. Now the way this is going to work is when I hit generate, it'll fill in all the blank spaces. So what we're going to do is we're going to erase the part that was specific to the last character, and we're just going to make this one a fantasy digital art painting of a strange musician in a surreal, mysterious... I also don't know how to spell, and that's great. You don't need to know how to spell either. A mysterious... I like to use psychedelic, if I can spell it. Psychedelic. Okay, that's not how you spell that. Psychedelic, great. A building. A musician in a surreal, mysterious psychedelic building, looking out his window with a musical instrument in hand. Let's see if that gives us anything. Generate. Now, this may or may not work on the first time, but the good news is that one roll of the dice on Dall is only going to cost you less than 10 cents. So we're going to give that a second, and if we don't like it, we can re-roll. And as you can see, it's pretty fantastic. Let's go through our options. This is already worthy in my mind to just go direct, like, it filled in the hair so well. Do you see this? And as I had mentioned, the edge detecting, you can see there's a little bit of the background that we didn't erase, sort of as a halo. I'll show you what I'm going to do to edit an image to finalize it. If we look at a couple others, we do get some silly results. I could, if I like this, I could go back. I could specify more about the details that are wrong, and they would essentially fix themselves. I won't exactly show you what I mean, just because it's a bit more complicated, but this one's another really good one. I don't necessarily love the proportions. This would actually be really good for a halfling, perhaps. I am going to save that, though, because each roll of the dice here, you do get to keep all of these images. You get all 4. This one's also really cool. I really like the background on this one. It really keyed into the coloration of what we had before and sort of filled in this really cool and surreal scene. That's why I like using words like surreal and psychedelic. Also, the instrument he's holding is not exactly good enough to suggest that he is a bard, so I don't know if I love that. This one, again, is still the best. Now we have 2 options, and I'll just show you maybe what we can do to get a couple other results. The best thing to do is to just go back to the original, and I'm going to hit generate again instead of variations. I'm just going to generate again. Essentially the same idea. I think Dall is really great, but their UI is slightly misleading, so I hope this is educational for everybody. And as we can see, we have some more really cool stuff. I like the inclusion of the window in a lot of these results. This is very fantasy because we can see the non-Euclidean clipping through the window. I like that a lot, but for my purposes, I don't think I'm going to use this particular image. Again, we have some very interesting fantasy elements, not necessarily what I'm looking for there. This is pretty cool. I really enjoy the architecture of this room and sort of a cubist style cubism, and all of this is really cool. I'm not going to use this one. After going through these results and these results, I'm pretty sure we have our winner. This is going to be our next image that we are going to use. So in order to finalize this, I'm going to go ahead and go back into our GIMP program. I'm going to open up my downloads because that is where the downloaded image is going to be saved to. We'll just drag that on and we can actually just delete the previous. And this is already the right canvas size, of course. Now, the first and most obvious thing that I would want to fix is this discrepancy here. So I'm going to zoom really close in. I'm going to go ahead and use the smudge tool here. I'm going to use Control and left click to select the background color, and I'm just going to blend in this way. Now, this is going to essentially hide this line pretty well. And as we can see, it did cause a bit of a aliasing issue here. The important thing to do is to continue to use Control and click to grab samples of the background color. And as you can see, what that'll do is layer in the color a little bit more organically and allow you to tone match a little bit closer. But as we can see, if we zoom back out, that little area is much less pronounced, and we can even see what we might want to do to make it even better. So zooming out and zooming back in is always a really good way to see what we need to get that big picture. As we can see, we don't want to make any strange changes to the original image. Now, another thing we can do is the blur. Now, blur is really good for is hiding the super minute details. So we're going to just blur that out just a little bit, and that's going to make sure that those edges are not too sharp. And as we can see, you can no longer tell that there was anything wrong with that spot to begin with. So the rest of the image I think is pretty good. What we're going to do though is we are going to crop out the Dall-E image logo. Sorry, Dall-E, but I paid for this. And I'm going to go to image, crop, image to selection to get rid of that. Of course, that changes the aspect every so slightly. You can make the aspect ratio whatever you want. If you want to keep it square or you want to zoom in, you can crop this as you like. Okay. So the next part is we are going to finish up with some final touches, which are mostly going to be filters. So what I'm going to do is put first a focus blur because the background does not need to be so sharp. The foreground and the background should be blurred a little bit, and it should actually focus on the character itself a little bit more. And as you can see, the focus blur is pretty strong to start, so we're going to turn that opacity down quite a bit, and that gives it a much more dreamy quality. Then what we're going to do is we're going to center this more on the face, and we're going to just play around with it and get something we enjoy. So as you can see, that adds a really nice effect on things like the shirt. It makes it more 3D, especially with a pattern. That's a really pro tip, is something like a focus blur can bring things that are patterned like this really 3D very, very easily. Okay, we can go even back, and you can see how much more flat that shirt looks. Ready? We'll apply the blur. Look how much more 3D that looks. Because you're blurring as you're getting away from the focal point. That makes it look more 3D. Same as the curtains down here. Now it kind of looks more like we are actually in that room. You can see those heavy contrasted lines down here are gone. It stops drawing your attention away from the character. With the blur on, we see that character so much more clearly. A couple other things that we could use. If we go through the list, we don't need any more blur. Now, sometimes I like to sharpen the whole image, but I don't think we need to do that. That sort of offsets some of that blur as well, so it's sometimes better to sharpen and then blur after. We don't need any distorts, and I wouldn't use any distorts in the entire image. I would make a smaller section to distort if I was going to do something like that. Vignette is not a bad idea, but I don't necessarily think it's necessary here, so we're not going to use that one. If you want to add shadows to the character and make it more like they have an effect on the environment, what you would do is just highlight the character or whatever you want to have a shadow, and then you would use the long shadow or the drop shadow. I'm not going to do that here because I think the background took care of that already. Now, here's a good one, artistic, and then if we go to canvas, we can make it look like an actual canvas painting. That's not really the style I'm going for, but it's pretty cool. Oilify is really good. That's going to make a digital art look. And Cartoonify is going to be good because it's going to add outlines, and that can help if the composition is weak. This composition is pretty strong, but I would say it could be stronger. So why don't we look at cartoon? Now, as you can see, that is way too much. We're going to reduce the opacity to about 30%, and the mask radius is going to go ahead and go down, and we'll slowly just increase that opacity and decrease some of the mask. So that's with, and that's without. I don't think we need it. It didn't do too much, and that's the sign that it's not necessary. So cartoon is good for some things. For example, we did cartoon here. Reason being, I wanted more detail on things like the crown and the jawline here. If I go here, you can see how it added those lines. That's with, that's without. So sometimes Cartoonify can help you. I'm going to actually try out next is Oilify. And as you can see, that kind of has a strange effect. Again, we're going to bring the opacity down to about 50%. That's going to blend it. If you don't do that, it's not going to look blended. Now, I kind of want more. So if I click on Mask Radius, we're going to see a lot more detailing in the hair, and we're going to see a lot more abstraction in the details here. If we turn mask down, it's almost like it didn't exist. And we can just play around with that a little bit. Now, it does blur you out just slightly. It kind of looks like we've got a brush blur. If we maybe reduce the opacity quite a bit, that's with, and that's without. Again, not much of a change. So I think this would be what I would consider suitably oil paint-like. If you're not sure if it looks like an oil painting, GIMP will tell you, okay? I'll just go through any other options I might use here. We have decor is pretty cool. You can add fog or make it look like an old photo, like so. That's actually pretty cool if you wanted to use this as maybe a handout. But for my purposes, I think this is better. We'll just keep it normal. The map section does also have a couple of interesting choices, but for the most part, this is going to cause a lot of distortions and stuff like that, which is kind of cool. You know, you could use this to make the art more interesting, you could say. You know, you can really play with the opacities and stuff like this. And also, if you use your arrow keys on the mode here, you can kind of, like, that's pretty cool. Obviously, there's a little bit more work that can be done there. But yeah, you can see that you can really play around with this. All right, that is actually going to finish it off. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. I hope it helps you, and I hope you make some really cool NPCs with this method. If you come up with something really cool, feel free to comment in the comments down below and let us know what you have done so that others can follow in your footsteps. And if you are interested in joining my Discord server and my D&D games, I run games on Discord, and I will be free to send you the link to that. It is also in my bio. Thank you for watching, and have a great day, and don't forget to export your work to your desktop and as a JPEG to save room. All right. Thanks for watching. See you next time, everybody.